So in 1570, the island of Cyprus got to enjoy the horrors of the Ottoman war machine as the Venetian cities of Nicosia and Famagusta came under siege in quick succession. Cyprus, which is located here, was under the control of the Republic of Venice since 1489 and provided them a crucial trading location in the eastern Mediterranean. And as one chronicler put it, Cyprus sat in the wolf's mouth as it was surrounded by Ottoman territory. When Selim II ascended to the Ottoman throne, he wanted to mark his ascension with the conquest of Cyprus, completing Ottoman control in the eastern Mediterranean, something they hadn't been able to do due to a long war with Hungary. Cyprus had two important cities, the central capital of Nicosia and the eastern trading port of Famagusta, and the Ottomans led by Lala Mustafa first laid siege to Nicosia. As if they were besieging Famagusta first, they would get harassed from the central capital, something that happened in a similar situation 5 years earlier at the failed siege of Malta, and they had clearly learnt their lesson. The fortifications of Nicosia, constructed only a few years prior, were enough to make you weak at the knees. It was a perfectly symmetrical star fortress that measured 3 miles wide across, and it had a moat fed by the local river, and those Italian engineers must have been swimming in bitches as they loved constructing ditches. However, the city needed around 20,000 men to defend its entire perimeter, but it only had around 12,000, with many being Greek levies who were given basically no equipment and were so poorly trained they couldn't fire their muskets without setting their beards alight. They were also led by the incompetent Nicola Dandolo, who forbid any cavalry charges out of the city to harass the Ottomans, stopped others taking initiative, as well as hoarding gunpowder, not allowing anyone to have a shot unless it inflicted great casualties on the Ottomans. They were also heavily outnumbered by around 60 to 80,000 Ottomans, and despite all this they held out for just over a month before the Ottomans stormed in, brutally sacking the city, with Dandolo being beheaded and his head sent to the commander at Famagusta. Famagusta, commanded by Marc Bragadin, held around 8,000 defenders and was called the city sunk into the sand by the Greeks, and had also been fortified a few years prior with great thick walls, bastions, gatehouses, ditches, and of course, bitches. The Ottomans rocked up in September, parading the heads and live captives they got from Nicosia, trying to force a surrender, even forging letters to the Venetian ambassador in Istanbul saying that Bragadin had permission to surrender, but the Venetian patriots weren't going to give up without a fight. The winter months were reduced to minor skirmishes. However, in January a small Venetian relief force arrived, destroying many Ottoman temporary fortifications and ports as the Ottoman ships had withdrawn for the winter. On the night the Venetian relief force departed, Bragadin set a trap saying none of his troops should appear on the battlements in the morning, and the Ottomans, as the relief force ships had gone, they believed that everyone inside the city had been evacuated the previous night. Looking up at the silent ramparts, they soon advanced towards them before they were met with cannons with grape shot, furious musket fire, and a great cavalry charge out of the gate, which cut down many of their troops. Spring sailing conditions allowed the Ottomans to be reinforced, swelling their numbers to up to around 100,000 now, as they built great earthworks allowing their cannons to be higher than Famagusta's city walls so they could shoot in, as well as thousands of tunnellers undermining the city walls. By late June, Famagusta was running out of supplies as a definitive breach was now made in the walls, and by late July, all of these supplies were gone with only around 500 able-bodied defenders remaining as they had beaten off 5 major assaults, killing roughly 60,000 Ottomans. The city was no longer tenable, and Bragadin, having to be begged by his men to surrender, finally gave in and agreed to Mustafa's terms, which were quite reasonable, allowing them to leave with safe passage. However, what actually happened when they met is differing depending on if you read the Ottoman or Venetian sources. Whether it was Bragadin's pride, his taunts to Mustafa upon offers of surrender, or Mustafa just losing thousands of his troops and wanting revenge, is unknown, but both sides claimed that the others had broken the terms of agreement and Bragadin suffered a horrific fate for it. He had his ears and nose cut off, made to drag sacks of earth through the city while his wounds were festering, kissing the floor every time he passed the pasha, and then he was dunked in the sea repeatedly on top of a galley mast, before he was flayed alive with his skin stuffed with straw, and then he was paraded through the city. His death and subsequent massacre of Christians inside the city would finally galvanise a Holy League to unite and take on the Ottomans at the decisive naval battle at Lepanto only a few months later.